talk about here tonight. You know, the president stressed today he had a better midterm election than any first-term president in generations. How do you explain that?
Well, look, there's a lot to unpack. You know, I think this was not a great night for Republicans, but in many respects, it was a good night for our republic. And we didn't see a red wave, but we did see what I would describe as a red, white, and blue wave. In other words, voters on both sides really strongly rebuked some of the more extreme candidates on both the left and the right. So while it wasn't a great night for Republicans, it was a good night for some Republicans. For example, Ron DeSantis in Florida, he dramatically overperformed where he was 4 years ago. He won by almost 20 points, and DeSantis, along with other Republicans like Marco Rubio, have really reshaped the demographics of that entire state and have created a model for long-term conservative success. And what that looks like is fighting really with principle. So it was a great night for some of the more, quote, normal candidates, the more, I would say, conventional, straightforward conservative candidates. Governor Sununu in New Hampshire, Mike DeWine, of course, DeSantis, who I mentioned, Governor Kemp in Georgia, who's a nemesis of President Trump. So it wasn't a great night at all for former President Trump. He injected himself in the race in a lot of unhelpful ways. He helped elevate candidates who weren't terribly articulate or likable. Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, for instance, he elevated Oz ahead of other more electable candidates, and he paid a price for it. So there's a bit of a revolt happening right now among conservatives against the assumption that Trump is going to be the standard bearer of the party. So I think if Trump is going to make an announcement on November 15th, it ought to be as a fundraiser for Ron DeSantis, because DeSantis clearly has demonstrated an ability to win in a way that Trump hasn't as of late.
Yeah, I was just reading, though, that Trump has already come out and said that he had far more votes than DeSantis in this situation. So we'll see about that. Now, as far as the balance of power, though, hasn't been decided for either chamber yet. Even if the Republicans take the House back, which looks likely, do you think Kevin McCarthy is still the front runner for Speaker? And what does he have up against him, given the tight margins here?
Yeah, I do think McCarthy's probably favored to be Speaker. And I'll just a very quick history story is I actually staffed the coup against Newt Gingrich over 20 years ago when Tom Coburn was in the House of Representatives. So I know from firsthand experience that when there's a small margin, it really can empower certain factions to take charge and force a new direction. But in this case, back in that time, there was a litany of problems with former Speaker Gingrich, whereas now that's not so much the case. I think it would be pretty unfair to blame the Republican disappointment on Kevin McCarthy. I think, former President Trump shares far more blame. But look, he's going to have, assuming he does become Speaker, he's going to have a very, very hard time, because there's a huge difference in the House between having a 5-seat majority and a 10-seat. If you have 5 or less, you have to worry about defections. You have to worry about people retiring, even illnesses. So it's going to be a very, very tight margin. And on any issue, there's always going to be 1 or 2 or 3 people that just disagree for a different set of reasons. So he's going to have his work cut out for him. And I think for Republicans to be effective, they really need to articulate what a different policy agenda looks like. What do they want to be for? And again, if you look at the Republicans who were successful in this campaign, it was those who were more serious and those who were more thoughtful that had a coherent agenda. Whether you liked it or not, you knew where Ron DeSantis stood on issues. And that's what McCarthy has to do, and that's tough to do in a very narrow majority.
All right. We appreciate your insight, John Hart, political analyst, executive director of C3 Action. Really appreciate you joining us here at Newsy.
Right.
Well, the state of Florida bracing for yet another powerful storm. Here's meteorologist Scott Withers with more on Hurricane Nicole.
Yeah, Julie, we are about to have a very rare event right here in Florida, a November hurricane. I'll have the latest on Nicole coming up right here on Evening Debrief. Don't go anywhere.
At Rulala, feel like $1 million without paying the price. Seize the deals